to order. We're resuming meeting number 27 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Procedure and House Affairs, which started on April 13th, 2021. Today's meeting is taking place in hybrid format, pursuant to the order of January 25th, 2021. It seems that for now, all members are participating virtually today. No members seem to be in the room, but I'll remind them of the rules in the room if any members do wish to attend in person. For now, for the people attending virtually, reminder, I think it's always helpful, unmute yourself before you speak, mute yourself after you speak. I know we all forget that in every meeting we attend sometimes. So just a reminder, and no screenshots or photos of your screen. Other than that, a reminder also to make sure your interpretation channel is correctly selected, so you don't miss out on any of your the fellow members' comments in committee. And for anyone wanting to make a point of order, you can unmute yourself and make that point of order. And then there can be obviously debate on that point of order. But as for a speakers list, we do have one from the last meeting. Mr. Turnbull is at the beginning of the speakers list. Some of the speakers are not here today, some are, so I'm just going to eliminate the ones that aren't here, but you could indicate your desire to speak by raising your hand in the toolbar below. And also wanted to remind the committee that we do have that deadline that seems so far away of the main estimates is approaching a little bit closer now. So we do, or maybe the clerk can let us know, he has already spoken to House administration and the relevant parties that we would have to call to committee for that. And they obviously, as always, are willing to appear, but I don't know if, Justin, you have any more updates as to where you would see that fitting into the calendar if we were to get it done by the deadline?
Well, Madam Chair, I do have House officials as well as officials from Parliamentary Protective Services and Elections Canada on standby, so to speak, in case the committee did want to pivot to the main estimates at some point before the May 31st deadline, which is of course a hard deadline. At that point, if the committee hasn't taken up the main estimates, they'll be automatically referred back to the House. So in many ways, the officials from the House, PPS and Elections Canada are in your hands. They are on standby, they are available to come. Probably more than about just 48 hours notice would be best for them, but they can scramble on relatively short notice if that is required, and if the committee does choose to want to go to main estimates prior to the May 31st deadline.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, my experience is they do accommodate quickly, but 48 hours is usually, appropriate at least for us to be able to provide. So I just wanted you guys to all be aware of that we should be providing a few days of notice before deciding to jump to that. Like, we can't just plan to jump to that the day before. And of course, not the day of. There were some questions last time about relevance and repetition, and there are no real hard and fast rules for committees per se, but what we do look to are the rules that the speaker goes by when it comes to enforcing or reinforcing how to follow the rules of repetition and relevance. Generally, I guess from that, what I could take is that currently, since we are on debate on Mr. Turnbull's amendment, the debate must always be centered on the provisions of the amendment, and that members must always relate it back to the amendment. Determining relevance will be based on this principle, and this is what's grounded in the procedural authorities that are set forth for the speaker. However, members, as you know, are given leeway to relate what they are speaking on back to the amendment. And repetition, you can alert me to any repetition. Generally, we have talked about this before too. Any word for word repetition of paragraphs will not be allowed. And if that is done and the person is reminded, alerted, and they continue to repeat word for word previous paragraphs, we will have to remove them from their spot and move on to the next speaker. However, repetition for the point of emphasis or short statements or sentences would be allowed. That is not seen as repetition of a whole speech or entire paragraph. So I guess what I'm trying to say is someone repeating the context, or is someone trying to um, put emphasis their on the context with style in a stylistic way by repeating certain things. So there's a difference between the two, and you can definitely alert me to when you think that difference is, or it's crossed the line into actual repetition, and I can rule at that point. But so I just wanted to remind everyone about the framework that we are working within, not starting now, but we have been all along. And we will go back to the speakers list on Mr. Turnbull's amendment. And we are currently on the first speaker as being Ryan Turnbull. So Ryan, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks for those opening remarks and helpful reminders. I know we had a few interruptions last time to different speakers on the basis of repetition, and I appreciate the clarifications you've made. I certainly feel that repeating some points within an argument for emphasis sake is certainly one of my stylistic preferences, and not not in any way to waste time or to be overly repetitive, but simply to drive home very specific points that I think are key within an argument. One that I would repeat again, that I've made over and over again, which I again hope that opposition members will take to heart and maybe reflect on. And this is the heart of the argument that I've been making, and I've been expounding on this in many different ways. But if a global pandemic is not a good enough reason for proroguing Parliament, then I would say nothing is. So I've been continuing to make the argument that the economic impact of this global pandemic, and I understand that it is first and foremost a public health crisis, so we really should be focusing at all times on public health, because you can't have a livelihood without a life. And we've seen the tragic loss of human life, and we must never lose sight of the fact that every life matters. And I say that for all of the people and families and communities that have been deeply impacted, so deeply, like the grief is almost unthinkable for those families. And I think one thing that we've become slightly desensitized to is seeing numbers and statistics and focusing on public health data and graphs, when we have to realize that these hundreds and hundreds of deaths and individuals that are in ICUs, that are on ventilators, are all individual human beings with networks and relationships, and that have made massive contributions to their communities and their families, that they're loved, that they have this fulsome life that is being taken away by a virus. And it's no one's fault. Like I think we need to get away from the blame game. At the same time, I think what we need to do is really cherish those lives and honor those lives in everything that we do. And I think, when we're doing this work in this study and in this committee, we tend to be focused in the rearview mirror, and the prorogation happened. It's almost a distant memory at this point. I have tons of information on the reasons for proroguing, but it's faded in my memory just because there's so many more pressing things for us to be paying attention to that are immediately before us and in front of us. And so it's very disheartening that we're continuing with this. I've continually tried to be, I think, appeasing and flexible and adaptable to the perspectives of my honorable colleagues from the opposition parties. And I propose an amendment to Ms. Vecchio's motion with that intention that maybe we can do a little bit more study on prorogation, but quickly move on. We see that the opposition parties are not interested in negotiating or being flexible, or really working with us on the things that I think are even more pressing, and that's really unfortunate. And I really feel that that there's quite a bit of work to be done that's more immediately pressing. The main estimates you mentioned, Madam Chair, I think are, a pretty important responsibility that our committee has. I think that would take one meeting. Perhaps that's an opportunity for us to fulfill some of our other duties. And I would also say Division 37 in C30, the Budget Implementation Act, and this is an area that I've certainly been affected by and concerned about for some time, which is the prevalence of disinformation within election periods, and just how much that can have an impact on our democratic institutions, and some of the I think fundamental rights that we hold dear here in Canada. And so, I really feel it's important for us to do the work on the pieces of the Budget Implementation Act, Bill C30, that are really required of us. If I were to be really honest about it, it's within the standing orders. Defines the parameters of PROC, and this fits clearly within our mandate. So, and I don't see how the Finance Committee will do that work and the other pieces of their work that have to be hived off and given to other committees if we don't do our part. Anyway, enough said on that for the moment, but I really feel strongly about that and Bill C19. Bill C19 is the, one thing that I think it's important for opposition members to realize is that the adaptation powers for the Chief Electoral Officer of Canada comes into effect upon royal assent for Bill C19. And those adaptation powers would protect the health and safety of Canadians should opposition parties trigger an election. And they've becoming dangerously close to doing that with some of the voting in the House. So we're sort of playing roulette at this point, or opposition parties are playing roulette with people's health and safety, in my view. And I really think that that's irresponsible. Now, I'll get back to my main argument here that I've been making, and I have a lot more to say about the hardest hit industries and sectors and some of the structural barriers to their recovery that are no fault of any industries or any industry players or businesses, but is really in virtue, I think, of how those business models are. I'll talk about restaurants or food service, the food service industry. I spoke last time more about the airline industry. I covered a little bit about tourism, transportation, warehousing, public transit, commercial real estate, in the retail trade. And where I left off was on talking about our local chambers of commerce and some of the work that was done around the digital Main Street initiatives that I really felt helped some of the retail businesses pivot within the pandemic. And again, I want to make it clear as to why I'm So just for relevance sake, and I believe in, making an argument that's relevant at all times. This is relevant because what I've been claiming and substantiating with facts and evidence is quite clearly that the economic impact of COVID-19 is at the very least 10 times greater than the recession in 2008, 2009. And again, this is, the heart of this argument is to say, again, that this global pandemic, because of the economic impact being so much greater, if we were to say that an economic crisis or recession was a reason to prorogue Parliament and to reassess and reevaluate and reset the agenda, and that's been a valid reason to prorogue Parliament in history, then I think this, really, again, provides evidence as to why our Prime Minister chose to prorogue and use that prerogative that he had between the first and second wave of COVID-19. And again, I've been speaking to how this is rational. It makes sense. The process from many stakeholders that then fed into a throne speech that reflected that. And what I want to focus on today in my argument is really just the depth of the impact on some of the hardest hit industries, and then some of the things, again, that were extended and even added, and some of the programs and supports that our government offered that were redesigned, coming out of that reevaluation period during the time that Parliament was prorogued. And again, I have to say this because, for me, I feel that opposition members have implied many times over that the government sort of took a break at that time and, essentially prorogued to just sit around or something. I don't know, twiddle their thumbs. And they've also claimed that the speech from the throne had nothing new in it. And I really this is just so false, factually false, that, if you look at the throne speech, it reflects the data and evidence and consultation work that was done during that time. If you look at how much consultation work was done, I went to, and I've said this before, I've went to at least 15 different sessions. I, in my community, did hundreds of surveys and consultation sessions, just me, and I'm just one member of Parliament. So, and I know that my colleagues did the same. So when I step back from this, even when I'm trying to be charitable to my opposition colleagues, I still cannot find any evidence of how this overall narrative and story that's based in reason and evidence that we've provided is somehow deficient. So, and again, there seems to be no effort to assess the merit of the reasons that were given. There's no, and I don't know how we got to this place, because in my view, our government has done everything it can to be there for Canadians every step of the way. I'm not saying we're perfect. I absolutely would not say that. I am not perfect. None of my colleagues are. I think we all have things we can. I know, Mr. Amos, you may be the exception, my friend, but for me, I can certainly admit various flaws. But I think that, really what we need to do is assess the merits of the report that was tabled upon, look at it upon face value and say, what is deficient about this rationale? And I can't find anything that doesn't make sense to me. And yeah, okay, I'm in the governing party and I'm a liberal, and yeah, I get that, but I try to step outside of my perspective and really critically evaluate and say, okay, is there any charitable or generous way that I can interpret the merits and the truth of the perspective of those that oppose my perspective? And again, I think this has to be a part of our democracy and our debates at all times, because if we can't get outside of our own biases and perspectives, then we truly have lost our way. But when I do that, I still cannot find anything that doesn't make sense based on what I've seen, and what data I have at my fingertips. And so I don't know where opposition members are really coming from when they're pushing the narrative that somehow prorogation was done for some ulterior motives that they seem to want to push. It seems just like a partisan political agenda that has no basis in reality. And I'm sorry to say that, honestly, but that is how I feel. And I don't see any argument coming from the opposition that's been made that really holds any water. So, for me, I just feel like, okay, well, I will continue to provide more data and evidence and back up the claims that I'm making, because I think they're the closest approximation of the truth. And until opposition members can actually engage in a fruitful debate on that, then I think we're really just at an impasse. You have your narrative and preferred interpretation that's not based in facts and reality, and I have mine, or our members have ours. And the difference is we are providing evidence, data, and reasons that make sense. The process makes sense. The themes in the throne speech make sense. The timing makes sense. The report is consistent with that. The testimony given by the government House leader was consistent with that. So what is this really about when it comes down to it? What is it really about? And I would say to you, it's not about Canadians. We're here to serve Canadians. I want to do things that are valuable to my constituents and not waste precious time that we have as leaders in our communities. We were afforded the privilege and honor of representing the people of our constituencies. And I take that responsibility seriously and with great pride and honor. And to be really at this moment in time where we have a third wave that is, we had the emergency debate last night in the House. Madam Chair, I know you were there on House duty with me, and I'm sure some of my other colleagues were as well. But, like, at least in that debate, there were things that were being said that I think we're starting to get beyond, or at least there was moments where we started to just see a glimmer of hope of getting beyond the partisan politics and focusing on what Albertans need right now to get through this third wave. And I would say those glimmers or moments, those brief moments where we seem to almost transcend the partisan swordsmanship and jousting, like it was like, okay, let's just go a bit further, one step further, and really collectively come together and do our job for Canadians. And it gave me just a glimmer of hope, and it was gone so quick. And here we are back at committee, basically ensnared in the same political sort of jousting that, to me, is just, it's unfortunate. It's more than unfortunate. It actually makes me feel sad. It really does. It actually, it's disturbing that this is what we're up to. Anyway, I'll get back to my argument. But so let me say a little bit about the retail industry. By June of 2020, the retail activity had surpassed pre-COVID levels, while payroll was 15% lower. This is kind of interesting just in terms of, again, understanding the impact on our economy and how unequal it is across industries. So the retail industry in June of 2020 was coming back. It rebounded very strongly retail activity surpassed pre-COVID levels for a brief time, of course, because when we then had the full out second wave, obviously that all changed again. And payroll was still lower, so it wasn't as if. So in a way, you would anticipate that in fact many retailers were more profitable in that time because their payroll was down, but their sales activity was up, which is interesting. Anyway, the point is between February and May, the sales had fallen by 18%, but e-commerce sales had doubled during the same period, which is interesting as well. So, and what I would say to you is that it was many of the non-essential retailers which were able to pivot to e-commerce. And I would link this back to our government's support, because in my community, I know for a fact that the digital Main Street initiatives and the efforts made by our business improvement area in both our downtowns, because we were fortunate enough to have two in Whitby in my riding, but also the work that the Chamber of Commerce had done to help, and the region of Durham and across, including my riding and others adjacent to mine. They did incredible work to help local retailers move to online sales. So, I mean, this didn't allow them to fully recover. It didn't insulate them fully from the impacts of COVID-19, of course, during the first and eventually the second wave. But it did help. And what's interesting to note as well that many of the essential retailers, the retail stores that were deemed essential, actually continued to operate and actually increased sales dramatically. So again, you just think about the equity issues here within the economic impact of COVID-19 and how important it is for our government to target support by taking the time to understand these dynamics and really listen to the industry associations that were giving feedback quite vocally. And again, to inform our approach. Have we lived through? I mean, I haven't lived through a global pandemic. Has anybody here? Can anybody here? Please raise your hand. I'd see hands raised, but please give me a signal if you've lived through a global pandemic before. Yeah. No, nobody has. So for me, and some of us may have studied global pandemics, but I would say this one is not the same. I mean, it may have some characteristics which are clearly similar, which I'm sure Dr. Duncan could speak to. But, I think really the way in which the state of our economy, the point in time, the moment in history, and how this happened, and the specific nature of the virus and how it's affected us is really something that none of us could have anticipated. And I think has had a unique impact that we couldn't have comprehended in a way before it happened, which is interesting, to think about in terms of reflection and how important it is to learn from this, but also to realize that not every virus and not every pandemic, not every communicable disease is going to impact us in the same way. And I think that's something else that we need to take from this, because being prepared for public health emergencies and other climate-related emergencies is going to take a real adaptability and an ability to predict various different ways in which things could unfold based on different types of threats and risks, etc. So, that I think I really welcome those conversations in the future in terms of learning all we can from this experience. But again, just to go back to my point here is we couldn't really have predicted that, some businesses were going to stay open. And, in many respects, some of those decisions were not within federal jurisdiction. So, you have provincial governments doing different things, and doing it in a way that that you know we weren't making those decisions. Sure, we were to some degree providing some guidance and advice, but not always. And many of those decisions were made by provincial and territorial governments. And I think what I've heard in my community is that really those had impacts. The way that public health restrictions were rolled out and then rolled back, and how they were targeted to different industries and sectors, really had an impact on the different industries and sectors. And so businesses were struggling with different scenarios. And again, how are we as a federal government supposed to understand that if we didn't take the time to prorogue and reevaluate and listen to those stakeholders? So I really find it hard to, share in the perspective of some of my colleagues that seem to think that prorogation was not appropriate, or a good use of time, or was even for some other nefarious purpose. Like it really just makes sense to me that you've got to take time to reevaluate. And it's a lot of work to reflect and reevaluate too. It's not easy. It's not a holiday. It's not a holiday to learn and reevaluate. It actually takes great commitment to ensure a good, responsive government that is working for the people. It has to reevaluate all the time. And I would actually suggest we probably need to reevaluate constantly. And doing that, and I mean, I think we are, but I think perhaps there's ways to do that even better too. So, but back to my argument here, which is that I've gathered some facts and figures from the hotel industry as well that I think is pretty important. These were collected in Q3 of 2020. So the hotel industry or accommodations industry had identified situational factors that I think we're all aware of, but that were really impacting accommodations or the hotel industry. Ongoing travel restrictions, obviously, were one big one that they identified. Rising case counts, economic uncertainty, the Canada-U.S. border closures to non-essential travel, the reinstatement of gathering rules, the reopening kind of rollbacks, the support program extensions. These were all, situational factors. These were things that were in the context that they were dealing with, that they identified. I used to do strategic planning for organizations before getting into politics, and deal it with any organization, any large business. You would do a kind of situational analysis, or sometimes it was referred to as an environmental scan, before you developed a strategy. And we did this work collectively, but I also did it with individual organizations. I think it's better to do collectively, but it's more complex when you do it collectively, because there's many different situational factors that are affecting different stakeholders within a system. And I think when you think about the complexity of doing this at a national scale, with different levels of government, with many industries, with industry associations, with members of the public, with nonprofit organizations, with the list goes on and on and on. And you just think about the complexity of how this virus has had ripple effects through our entire society. And you just think about how the challenges of different people, depending where you sit and stand in that system, and what's relevant to you, it looks different depending on where you are. So, again, situational factors in that situational analysis And situational leadership, which depends upon that intelligence, is something that prorogation helped our government do, which is stay attuned to those things and those factors and the differences of perspective that are out there. And that to me is part of a responsible or responsive government. And you can't have good governance without being responsive. You can't. I mean, what does it even mean? What does good governance really even mean if we're not listening to the various voices and stakeholders from across the country, and especially in a 100-year public health crisis? So again, listening to the hotel industry, they had situational factors that they identified. The year-over-year change to occupancy for the accommodation industry in Q1 was down 10 points. In Q2 is down 49 points. So that was when the pandemic hit. In July and August, it was still down 37 to 42 points. And in Q2 revenue, their revenues were down 82%. So, you know, basically it started to get a little bit better in July and August, but you can imagine that that there was not a free for all on you know, the pent up demand. Everybody wants to take a vacation and go stay in a hotel and travel somewhere, but it really hadn't happened yet. July and August in 2020, we saw a moderate return of some revenues to the hotel industry, but very minor compared to what we saw in the retail industry. Again, what I'm pointing to is the inequity of the impacts of the pandemic, and the economic impact being greater, at least 10 times greater than the previous recession in 2008, 2009. And linking this all back for relevance sake for my colleagues, Ms. Vecchio and others, this is all a good reason to have the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance testify before this committee and give us some testimony as to how she understood all of these various impacts at the time, and how prorogation gave us the opportunity to reevaluate some of our programs and eventually, I think, really target some more supports for these industries. And I know some of that work is still ongoing, but there's lots of work that's been done. In particular, going back to the hotel industry, and again, Madam Chair, I'm sorry for taking up so much time. I tend to be a bit verbose. I think as my political career hopefully continues, I may get more concise in the future, but I struggle with this at times, so I'll work on that. But look,
point of order, Madam Chair.
Oh, yes, Ms. Vecchio.
Oh, actually, Mr. Nader had called the floor as well. If you want to pass it to Mr. Nader, that's just fine.
Oh, Mr. Nader has a point of order. Okay.
Yeah, sure. Just very briefly, just in response to Mr. Turnbull's comments about getting less verbose as time goes on, I would just remind him of Mr. Blakey's predecessor on this committee, David Christopherson, who used to say that you know, a 3-hour filibuster barely gave him enough time to clear his throat. So using the Sims protocol, I just wanted to interject that because Mr. Christopherson was a wonderful member of this committee prior to the previous parliament, to throw that in. But perhaps while I've got the floor, perhaps Mr. Turnbull could inform us whether he's had any conversations with Mr. Freeland, inviting her to respond to the previous invitation to this committee from January or February. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you for sharing that memory of Mr. Christopherson. I have fond memories of him myself. I do really miss him. He had such a long, impactful career in politics, and he definitely impacted all of us that served with him, and especially serving with him on this committee in the previous parliament was quite interesting. I learned a lot from him. And you're right, he used to make us laugh when he said he was just clearing his throat. Well, anyways, and maybe Mr. Turnbull can help clarify your other answer, your other question. Thank you.
Oh yeah, but before I do, I have to tell you, I've been influenced. So I wasn't a part of this committee when Mr. Christopherson was here. I've heard the many stories. He's sort of a legend. But what's funny is I did a lot of work in Hamilton with the YWCA Hamilton, and Mr. Christopherson's wonderful, absolutely fantastic, lovely wife, is the
Yes.
CEO of that organization. And I know her very well. Like, we are very good old friends. We work together on a whole bunch of YWCA related programming in downtown Hamilton, including their social enterprise cafe for
Really?
women on the main floor. And we helped, so prior to getting into politics, I wrote proposals and business plans for nonprofits and charities, and they were one of them. They got significant funding from some philanthropic private foundations to renovate their entire downtown location to have this cafe, social enterprise that actually employs women who have experienced domestic abuse or were living in their transitional housing. And so Mr. Christofferson is a legend in my mind, but through his wonderful, absolutely fantastic wife, who is a real community leader in downtown Hamilton. And so I just have to tell that story because although I didn't know Mr. Christofferson on this committee, I really feel like I know him and his family, and really believe in their leadership and their massive contributions to Canada and their local community. So shout out to them. Maybe I can clip this piece and send it to my friend Denise Christofferson. Anyway, sorry for that. That was a bit of an aside. What was I going to say? Oh yeah, Mr. Nader had said about the Honorable Chrystia Freeland. I haven't had a chance to talk with her. She's been very busy. I know that I think Justin, our wonderful clerk, had reached out prior, and I think that was mentioned before, but I'm sure if opposition members are willing to support the amendment that I put forward, we could send an invitation, re-invite both the ministers that are included in the amendment, and I would certainly welcome the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance. She's absolutely wonderful.
Right.
Anyway, so I'll
Point
get
of order,
back.
Madam Chair.
Oh.
Yes, Ms. Vecchio?
I just I recognize and just continuing with this, we had the opportunity, and I will not say Miss Petitpot Taylor, but Jeanette, I had asked, and the other day she had mentioned about trying to reach out as well. So perhaps one of the members of the committee of the government side has had the opportunity to speak to her. If we could just check with that, because that was something that was said would be a point of action on Tuesday.
Okay, I'll try my best, and anybody can email me as well, and I can try to inform the committee if there's any progress on that, or you're free to email each other as well and then speak to each other about that. Mr. Turnbull.
I'm getting the sense that maybe opposition members are willing to support my amendment, given that that the heart of it really is to have the Minister of Finance and the Minister of Youth, Diversity, Inclusion, and Youth come to the committee. Is that the case, Ms. Vecchio? Maybe I can use the Sims protocol to just ask you whether you're now supporting my amendment.
Well, actually, it's very interesting because the original motion already had all of these things in here. So we actually we appreciate the very first one. Let's take it to a vote. Why don't we find out, Ryan? This would be a great time to take it to a vote. If you're asking, if I say to you I would not support, that doesn't mean that we should not continue this conversation. We should kind of end it and end this filibuster of the last 14 weeks. I'm happy to go to a vote, and then we'll go from there. But if we look back at the January stuff, I recall being in that subcommittee report that we brought back to PROC, in which they were already invited. So thank you very much to the clerk for looking into this. But we've already supported things in your motion. We already have. It's just that we would like more to it. So let's carry on this conversation if you want, or open the door to the vote as we can do. Thank you.
Good, thank you. Maybe we can make some progress through this dialogue.
That would be great. I would really appreciate that. In particular, I'm hoping that my arguments here have swayed my opposition colleagues to support the amendment that I put forward. And so perhaps I can continue to make my best effort to bring you on side to the amendment. at any point, I hope you would express your willingness to support it if I'm successful. And I can only try my best, and I understand that we all have our own perspectives and our own interests, etc. But I hope that we'll get the support of some opposition members. Anyway, I'm going to go back to my argument. This seemed like a long tangent, but I want to continue to make my argument. Excuse me. The hotel industry was impacted specifically in most of our urban centers most dramatically. So the statistics that were gathered by the hotel industry, and I have them here. Just let me see here. Yeah, it's this report here, October 2020. It's the CBRE Hotels, the world's leading hotel experts, and it's specific to the Canadian impact of COVID-19. It's a substantive document. And so Montreal, Toronto, Calgary, Vancouver, Niagara Falls, Halifax, Toronto Airport, Calgary Airport, Montreal Airport, and the Greater Quebec City were the areas where the hotel industry was the most impacted. And so we saw the biggest declines. In addition to all of the situational factors that I had mentioned, there were also influences on recovery that kind of mirror some of those situational factors, but they demonstrate what the hotel industry is saying are really going to impact how quickly they can recover. And I've heard locally that that the hotel industry and some of the other industries don't expect to recover for quite some time. Like it may take them 2 years or more to recover from the pandemic. And this was their perspective after the first wave of COVID-19 in some cases. So I would say, this has only extended the hardship and the time of recovery that it will take for those industries to come back in full effect. And for I think again, we tend to talk about this stuff, and it almost dehumanizes, or it's not intentional, but we talk about it, but it's we're talking about businesses here, but what does it really mean when it comes down to it? Like there are people and families at the heart of these businesses, and this is people's livelihoods we're talking about. So I really think paying attention and taking the time to really understand these impacts on people and families and communities and local economies. It's not just I'm talking about industries and I'm bringing stats and information, but again, it's about the lived experience of families and workers and business owners, and they're hanging on by a thread at this point, if at all, because some of them I think are not. And part of this is due to pandemic wave after wave and the fatigue that comes with that. And I've maintained from the very start of this, well, I wouldn't say from the start, that might be a little bit too arrogant of me to say. I would say somewhere along the way, I think it was between the first and second wave, or just sort of as the second wave hit us, was the time that I think we realized that going through wave after wave of a pandemic is not the best public health or best economic approach. It's not. Mitigation versus elimination are the two. I've seen a study recently out of France, the university, or I think it's the university there. I have it somewhere here in my piles of paper. But it's a study that shows that the countries and jurisdictions around the world that focused on COVID elimination have fared the best from a public health perspective, but have also fared the best from an economic perspective. By far, like it's not even, it's undeniable based on the evidence. So what's interesting is that in this case, I think we see differences of value, philosophy, etc., between different parties at different levels of government, and we see, a different approach. at different levels, and this has created, again, more inequity in terms of the impacts, and in some cases, the multiple waves of a pandemic, which has exacerbated the impact, the initial impacts, its exponential impact and hardship on those families and the peoples in my community that I represent. And they've expressed this to me over and over again. I can't tell you how many calls I've had with local business owners that are at their end of their rope, like that are hanging on by a thread. And what I mean by that is that in many cases they've had to borrow money and access our government supports, but and although we've continually extended those, most people are saying that those are literally keeping them afloat. Like if those either come to an end prematurely, or the pandemic continues much longer, they don't know how they're going to survive and keep their businesses afloat, which really is their livelihoods for many small businesses that's at stake. And just as a business owner myself, 12 years, I started a business with $160 to my name and grew it over 12 years to a sizable firm with 11 staff and 30 contractors. And it was a full-time job, 24/7, and it was grueling in terms of the hard work to be an entrepreneur and grow a company. It's one thing to own a small company and keep it at the same level. It's another thing to try and build a bigger company. And you make plans as an entrepreneur to earn enough profit, even if it's just a little bit as a small company, so that you can reinvest it back into your company, so you can have better staff, you can provide more training and professional development, you can offer benefits, you can do all kinds of things for the people that are the heart of your company, and also invest in, for some businesses, and invest in new equipment. And depending on what kind of company you are, sometimes you have a higher reliance on equipment and a need for operational expenses to increase, and those are big investments. There's all kinds of things that are planned investments that entrepreneurs have as they try to build, a business. And you just think about how these plans are shattered right now for our entrepreneurs and small businesses, for those family-run businesses that are struggling through the wave after wave of this pandemic. And there's so much uncertainty for these folks. And a lot of it has to do with, science evolving, with our understanding evolving of this virus. And I know that opposition members at times, I know they feel very frustrated with the fact that they want answers, and I think Canadians do too. I'm not patronizing anybody when I say this at all. I really understand the frustration that we want to know the solution right now. Like, we want predictability. We want the answers right now. And the reality in a pandemic and in an evolving, crisis is we don't have that information. We don't have that certainty. And that is really unrooting. It's really causes a lot of anxiety out there. And I can really empathize with how this impacts the businesses in our communities. And there is so many of them that have this anxiety about, well, reopening, like, when are travel restrictions going to be lifted? They have so many questions about economic recovery and whether their customers are going to feel safe, whether there's going to be predictability to the future. And if you go back to what I was saying before about these planned expenditures and growth, and these plans are plans that are integrated into their families for small businesses. This is about as much about the growth of their company as it is about their livelihood, because these things are so closely tied together. When you're the owner of a business, a family-run business, you have a very close connection between your business and your family. And I think about the optometrists I talk to, or the accountants in my community, or the hair salons, the small shops along the Main Street kind of corridor. All of them are these types of businesses. The local cleaner, there's so many of them. They don't all fit into one bucket, but they're all these really committed, hardworking, entrepreneurial type people that have taken on great risk to do something that they love and believe in. And often it's not really for the profit at the end of the day. It's for the stability of their family. And they really are the ones that are impacted by this pandemic. I've talked about how many workers, individuals have been affected by this pandemic and the inequities across our society in terms of how that's played out. But today I'm really focusing on the small businesses and the hardest hit industries. And I want us not to forget that the economic hardships on them have been truly challenging at multiple levels. So I will continue. The food service industry, Restaurants Canada gathered statistics in October 2020 as well and produced those. So they took a little time to do the analysis, I'm sure. But I think that just in general, they experienced the food service industry really experienced a deep impact. They claim to be the hardest hit. And I think that they are. I think maybe some others that would, some other industry groups that may say they were the hardest hit, but I don't think it's worth arguing. They're all the hardest hit industries, and there's no doubt in my mind that they are all in need of attention, support, and empathy, and targeted measures to help them recover. And I think the only way we get those is by listening to them and by valuing their perspective. So again, taking the time to prorogue and listen to those stakeholders, I think was essential for our government, and I fully support taking that time. So 800,000 food service workers were laid off or had their hours cut to zero during the first wave of the pandemic. While many industries could bring people back to work, they were hovering at between 1 to 10% below pre-COVID employment levels in February 2020, or compared to February 2020, I should say. There continues to be a significant gap in the food service industry. They're one of the hardest hits for sure, with employment 21% below February 2020 levels. That was statistics in October 2020 or just before then. Again, I'm trying to use information all the time that was relevant at the time of prorogation. In this case, I think the data was analyzed it covered the summer of 2020, but was analyzed into the fall. So was still really relevant. And I know these associations were in dialogue with our government at the time, and I'm sure gave us the feedback, although I wasn't in those conversations with the national associations. I was definitely hearing the same things in my local community from my Chamber of Commerce and the local chapters of some of these associations. Over half of restaurants planned to, and still probably plan to, reduce their table service. This is a huge deal, obviously, for them. Many of them, of course, will want to open as soon as they can open patios so they can earn some revenue. But this, to me, really inhibits the social distancing, really has an impact on them, because, of course, when you look at the business model of a restaurant, who often have pretty razor thin margins. I've done about 15 different business plans for restaurants and catering cafe businesses of different kinds. I mentioned the one earlier that the YWCA runs in downtown Hamilton called At the Table Cafe. It's a cafe catering business and wholesale baking business. And what I can tell you is that that from doing very detailed financial analysis of these types of businesses, is they do have very thin margins. Looks like my internet might be slowing down. Am I coming through clearly, Madam Chair?
You are?
Okay, great. So essentially what I'm saying is that even as the economy starts to recover, or as public health restrictions are safely lifted in the future, and I really must stress that they need to be safely and slowly lifted to ensure that there isn't a fourth and fifth wave. And I think we need to be extremely careful at all levels when doing any reopening. I think what's important to realize about a restaurant or food service business, because it includes more than just restaurants, but for these businesses, their margins are so thin already, and within the pandemic, their operating costs have gone up slightly due to some of the equipment and public health measures that they've had to implement, and protocols that they've had to implement. From some restaurants have put the kind of plexiglass or whatever it's called around the booths where people sit in the restaurant. But even the social distancing and not having as many people, and everything depends upon how many tables you turn over in a day. And most of these businesses literally count down their cash every day at the end of every day. Am I still coming through? It seems like I'm pausing.
No, you're coming through okay.
Okay, good. Because for me, it seems that I'm pausing. It looks like I'm getting a bit of an internet issue right
Yeah,
now.
we hear some static now. So we're seeing it on your end a little quicker than we were.
I can confirm that it seems like time is standing still, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Calkins.
Was that Mr. Calkins? We haven't heard or seen from him before, but thank you for your comment.
He's listening. I guess he's listening. He's let you know.
Speaking of standing still.
It looks like you're in the middle of a stream there.
The clerk, I think the clerk was also having some internet difficulties a little while ago. Mr. Clerk, can you let us know if Ryan's, Mr. Turnbull's internet connection is stable?
Madam Chair and Mr. Turnbull, I'm just checking now with the IT techs in the room to get them to assess your connection. It does seem to be occasionally catching, but I think most people, everyone can still continue to hear you okay.
Great. Okay, that's good. I will
go ahead.
Close down some other windows and then keep going. I know sometimes that's helped. Okay. So thank you for that. So where I was going with all of this is really that the restaurant industry, because of the unique challenges with reopening and how dependent they are on volume and the expenditure, like the sort of average spend per table that they turn over in a restaurant, they're really going to struggle to essentially turn any kind of a profit or have any margin as they recover. And so as much as we want to help them, I think there are significant structural barriers for their industry that are unique because of the reliance on the physical space and the dining experience and how they normally operate, that creates some very unique challenges for the restaurant industry that I think we need to recognize and support. So I know that they feel like some of the provincial public health restrictions that have been implemented, and they've voiced this to me, many local restaurants in my
Point of order,
community.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
We are now talking about getting into the provincial stuff as well, and I know that we've all enjoyed this, but just about 15 minutes ago, when Ryan had opened the door for perhaps negotiations, they seemed to drop very, very quickly and went back into a filibuster speech. So I'm wondering if this is a time where we can really actually negotiate and say who wants what. I'm happy to bring this to the table. I'm happy to have these discussions. And I thought Ryan was actually going to go there and start talking about, you guys, we really want to have Minister Freeland. We understand that, we hear that, but perhaps there are somebody that we want to see, and not just perhaps what the government wants to see. If we're really negotiating, perhaps we can say, yes, we're happy to see this person if we can see that person. Ryan, perhaps we're willing to negotiate, and I'm just wondering if you're going to continue with the talk, or if we really want to get down to the core of what this motion is and start digging away at it and get it done. Let's get this stuff done.
Thanks, Madam Chair. My internet is continually. I did hear what Ms. Vecchio said, but my internet seems to be skipping and stalling, and it's really not working well. So perhaps I need to log out and log back in. I do appreciate Ms. Vecchio. If you can still hear me, I appreciate Ms. Vecchio's comments and would welcome, some conversation about that. Certainly, but perhaps I can ask for a quick. I can either put my cede the floor for the moment to one of my honorable colleagues, but I think I need to log out and log back in to try and reset my my internet connection here, because it's really not working for me.
Okay. Yeah, we can pass the floor on to Mr. Amos, but you can disconnect and reconnect, and we'll wait for you. But Ms. Vecchio, I'm glad that you appreciate what Ms. Vecchio has said. Maybe it will take us somewhere. You could have the conversation, obviously, however you like, whether it had in committee, or if you want to have it off the record, whatever you guys choose to do. But I definitely encourage that conversation. Yeah.
I thought the entire idea of having a business committee meeting was to discuss it, and this is exactly where we're at. We are at a committee table where we're discussing committee business. This is committee business about how we can negotiate on who's there and who's not. We have all, I'm sure everybody has read the Hill Times. I'm sure everybody has read that publication and has seen where we're at. If the public knows, I believe that the NDP, I believe that the Bloc, and perhaps they will speak on this, and I believe the Conservatives, there are many things that we are saying, let's talk about this. And perhaps either Daniel or Alain can say what they would like to see as well. But let's actually start negotiating. Let's actually say, yes, I respect that you want to see Ms. Freeland. Absolutely respect that. But in exchange, we would like to see the Prime Minister. And let's call it what it is. We would like to see the Prime Minister, and if we want to look at other things at this actual motion that we can start breaking down, let's go for it. But let's stop wasting time.
You're right, Ms. Vecchio. Absolutely, I stand corrected. I mean, you can definitely. This is the place to have the conversation. So hopefully that conversation does begin to evolve more quickly than what we have seen. So I appreciate you making that interjection. As Mr. Turnbull has to log off and relog back in, I am going to give the floor next to Mr. Amos at this point, though. And perhaps Mr. Amos can shed some more light on this and maybe continue rolling that ball forward.
Yes, well, thank you, Madam Chair. And as an irregular participant on this committee, I do greatly appreciate the opportunity to contribute and to learn. I'd like to tip my hat to Mr. Turnbull, whose contributions this morning have been illuminating, and I'd like to also appreciate that MP Vecchio is seeking to transact parliamentary business as between the parties, and I'm sure that the proper individuals in our on our squad will ensure that conversations happen as appropriate. Being an irregular member, I don't want to interfere in any way that would be untoward, of course. And members may recall when I had the opportunity last week to reflect on the relevance of prorogation and the particular point in the pandemic where we were late last summer. And we've moved to a different place now, and I think there's actually a fair point to be made that this entire exercise is a moot one. We're long past late summer. As we appreciate it, responsibly prorogued for a brief period of time in order to come back with a speech from the throne that could lay out a concrete vision in a moment where Canadians were looking for what are the next steps. And we felt that was the responsible measure to take as a government, and that's exactly what we did and why we did it. And then and that moved directly into a fall period of parliamentary activity, significant parliament activity, leading right up to the fall economic statement, which laid out a large number of concrete measures. And I want to get into some of those today, because I think one can only understand the relevance and the importance of the prorogation component by appreciating exactly what it led to. The speech from the throne, which recommenced parliamentary proceedings, going straight into a fall economic statement, and then, of course, more parliamentary debate through the winter leading to the budget. So there's a continuum here, and I think it's important for Canadians to understand that we're, this is all regular and dutifully conducted parliamentary process that is required as part of good governance, and it's required as part of our Westminster parliamentary democratic tradition. And I think that we're all well aware of the where prorogation fits into the tradition that we come from as part of the Crown's various reserve powers. I mean, we all appreciate that we are no longer at a point in history where all of governance is the product of royal prerogative. Nowadays, there are very few such royal prerogatives, including prorogation. Back centuries ago, when pandemics wreaked havoc on many societies, both in the Commonwealth and beyond, we lived in an era when the king or queen owned all the lands, made all the laws, and raised armies to defend the people, and attempted to conquer new territories to increase the wealth of the kingdom, and forced the laws, and then meted out justice. And over the past 4 centuries, those royal prerogatives have been whittled away at, and now we've gotten to the point where Parliament controls virtually everything. Our democratic system is much more robust, and there are very few powers, as I said, prerogatives that reside in the Crown. One of them is prorogation, and that is why the Prime Minister is required to bring to the Governor General that request for prorogation, and it was done responsibly. I think that MP Turnbull and my learned colleagues have repeatedly articulated the rationale for this, and obviously the motions on the floor would seek to bring some greater level of clarity and accountability around the prorogation decision. As I've said before, my own opinion is that this is a moot discussion, and Canadians would wish that we focused on the future and the future of vaccines, the future of economic recovery, the future of a return to normalcy for Canadian families, for seniors like those at St. Joseph's Manor who I visited this morning via Zoom, who want nothing more than to say hello to their families in person. Thankfully, and I'll pause on this tangential point just because it is such a lovely thing. I learned this morning that the good people at the St. Joseph's, the good residents at the St. Joseph's Manor in Campbell's Bay got their second shot this week. Stupendous news for those good people in Campbell's Bay on the north side of the Ottawa River, about 100 kilometers, maybe 80 kilometers west of Ottawa, west of Gatineau. And so that's what people want to be focused on right now. They want to focus on what are we doing to get to the next point of bringing us back. And that's what our government's been doing all along. Every single moment, every single decision has been focused on how are we contributing to making sure that Canadians can return to see their loved ones, can spend more time doing the things they want to do with fewer restrictions. How can we invest in the necessary fashion to procure and distribute vaccines, to rebuild our biomanufacturing sector, to render more robust our overall healthcare system? How can we assist other levels of government? How can we collaborate with other levels of government to bring about additional supports at critical times of need? And I think our hearts go out and our support is extended to those regions of the country that are right now really, really struggling, that are so challenged by this third wave. Whether it's Peel region, whether it's Nova Scotia, Alberta, we have regions that are really just focused on the here and now, and rightly so, because that's what matters. And I think that many of my constituents in the Pontiac would express great frustration at the notion that there is a national debate to be had around prorogation decisions made late last summer with a view to enabling a pivot after the first wave and before the second wave took hold. But let's take a quick step back and think about what prorogation enabled. And this is why it's so important to focus on MP Turnbull's amendment and what he would propose that we focus this committee's work on. If indeed there is to be time spent staring at the rearview mirror, let's focus on what prorogation enabled. Ce que la prorogation nous a permis de faire, c'était
what it enabled, it was to make things clear by a speech of the throne, an agenda for this second phase of the pandemic, because everybody knew that it was coming up. We had seen what was going on in Europe, And it was a time that we were aware of the need to prepare with protection measures for us, for our workers, for the small and medium businesses, our communities who were affected terribly by this pandemic. We had to prepare. We had the speech of the throne with emergency measures, clear measures that the government was going to implement. Increased protections, increased investments for our stakeholders at the municipal level. And this brought us directly, this speech of the throne, it brought us to an economic statement in the fall of 2020 with a whole gamut of measures and a whole slew of economic analysis. And we remember that in November 2020, we hadn't had a budget in 2020 because of the pandemic. So it was necessary and important for our economic stakeholders to understand well, to have an overview with facts, with statistics, so to understand where we were and in order to be able to plan for the budget of April 2021. I observe, and you, my colleagues, probably know what is in this economic statement of the fall of 2020. And I noticed that the discussion was about issues, or the information was about issues or concerns that were prioritized by the Canadian public. I'm looking at the information in the first table number 1, the number of doses of vaccines that were obtained per person wanting the candidate. That was a discussion in the last fall, the number of doses that Canada had obtained from various manufacturers, Pfizer, Moderna, AstraZeneca, Johnson & Johnson, Novavax, and others. It's interesting how the discussion evolved since then. Now we're in a position that is very different, as I said yesterday on my Twitter account, in terms of doses that were administered per 100 people. We're now a leader with Germany, the United States, Great Britain. So the situation has evolved greatly. We were in a very good position in obtaining access. They were approved by Health Canada, and now we are, several months later, over 35% of Canadians have had their first dose, and every day it's a little more. Let's get back to that economic statement. We can see how we were turning things around. We were talking about in the statement what had happened in the spring and how we had gotten to the fall, how we talk about deploying the Canadian Armed Forces in Ontario and in Quebec. This effort to protect the health and the lives of our senior citizens. the contributions from the Red Cross keep going, and the efforts of the Canadian Armed Forces are continuing. So we saw how this first step of the pandemic, how it involved in terms of public policy, the economic intervention, or
measures that were put in place, from the Canada Emergency Response Benefit to the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy, the Canada Emergency Business Account. There was an evolution, and with the collaboration of our of opposition members, there was an evolution of emergency policies, all designed to bend the curve, protect our frontline healthcare workers, help people stay at home and stay healthy, while continuing to pay their employees, pay their rent, pay their mortgages, stay on top of their bills, put food on the table. And by the end of summer of 2020, we were in a different place. I mean, I think we can all reflect back. MP Shanahan will recall. Sorry to disturb you out of your stupor. I know sometimes I can drone. And MP Long is looking at me as though he's paying great attention. That's well appreciated, MP Long. MP Shanahan will recall how we had planned a caucus, a Quebec caucus trip to Les Îles de la Madeleine. Oh, we were looking forward to working hard together to discuss what could be done as we emerged out of this first phase and pivoted, knowing that there was a second phase to come. History being what it was, we weren't able to meet, which was too bad. And we are all looking as Quebec caucus members to go back to Les Îles de la Madeleine and to be greeted by MP Diane and Minister Diane Le Boutillier to consider next steps. Not for now. But I recall at that moment we were looking at going there just so that we could take stock, step back, assess what had just transpired, and then look to the future. At the time, you know, we weren't even 10 months into a mandate, and so the government was in the exact same position. The government had confronted, along with governments across our country, our provinces and territories and municipalities, had confronted the urgent necessities of this pandemic, put in place the bricks and mortar of programs that could sustain families and businesses and workers. And it was the moment to look forward to what is next. What do we need to improve the supports? How do we need to invest more? What do we need to do to address revenue issues, expenditure issues? And that's what the speech from the throne enabled. And Canadians in my riding of Pontiac, you know, they demanded to know where we were going, and rightfully so. So as I see the fall economic statement, and I think about the importance of enabling our finance minister and our deputy prime minister, Chrystia Freeland, enable her presence before this committee to discuss that continuum, how we were going to be pivoting from the first phase of the pandemic into the second phase. I think it would be entirely appropriate for her to bring us through that that moment. Again, if this committee sees fit to continue to look in the rearview mirror and to continue to examine the past, I would argue that my constituents would rather we focus on the future, but that's a separate matter, and I will focus on the amendment at hand. But you'll pardon my underscoring of the fact that my constituents would much rather us be focused on the what's next of parliamentary procedure, as opposed to what was in our past. I'm looking now and would refer my esteemed colleagues to the second and third charts of the fall economic statement, focusing on the one hand on real GDP and employment rate, respectively, and noting the distinct difference of real GDP without direct support measures on the one hand, and with direct support measures on the other hand, making very clear, literally in black and white, in a bar graph, what the measures implemented by our government enabled in terms of GDP preservation, and in terms of, in the third chart, on employment preservation. Without, the third chart indicates that without the direct support measures, unemployment would have reached nearly 20%. Nearly 20%. That those kind of numbers are inconceivable for most Canadians. But due to the direct support measures implemented during that spike in the spring of 2020, the unemployment rate was kept somewhere around 13% at its peak, as opposed to 19. The Statistics Canada information is clear, but it's not just the Statistics Canada information. This is from Department of Finance survey results from private sector economists, as is the norm with all Department of Finance efforts in the context of economic statements and budgets, seeking that external data input to ground truth what is being published. So those are that's a significant indication of, to the Canadian public, in being provided in a transparent way, a significant demonstration of the importance of the support measures that have been implemented, preventing us from falling into a situation of nearly 20% unemployment, and rather being able to keep us between 10 and 15, and then for that unemployment rate to decline significantly, and I might add, much faster than the vast majority of our OECD partners and our G7 partners. We were able to make sure that the employment rate was maintained, and that's important in a future-oriented perspective, because what was happening, particularly through the wage subsidy, was the maintenance of a connection between the employer and the employee. And the effort was to incentivize the maintaining of employment, to keep the employer-employee units strong, so that there would be fewer pieces to pick up. Of course, our finance minister is far more eloquent than I am. What you have here before you is a mere member of parliament for Pontiac stumbling through the fall economic statement as best I can. I know that our finance minister would do far greater justice to the plan for protection of jobs and protection of Canadians' employment, and then the pivot into a plan for growth once the virus is under control and the economy was prepared to absorb it. The plan, as articulated in that fall economic statement, to deploy a three-year stimulus package to jumpstart the economy. And that's exactly what has just happened this past spring. Right? So I'm just pointing out a thread that everyone knows and sees as being entirely obvious. Everything seems obvious in hindsight. And of course, we're engaged here in an exercise in hindsight. But the finance minister indicated abundantly clearly, this is where we were heading. We're heading towards consistent supports on rent subsidies, with wage subsidies, to our municipalities, to our provinces, procuring billions and billions of dollars of vaccines at federal expense to distribute to the provinces so that they could manage with their own prioritization processes the vaccination of so many millions of Canadians, which is turning into the great success of 2021. The achievement that generations of Canadians will look back on and say, wow, I was there. I remember that moment. I remember how it felt so dark at Christmas and how frustrating it was to be separated from family. And I remember being challenged in my mental health through the winter of 2021. It was dark. It wasn't as cold as some other winters. Still cold, but not as cold. But tough, a tough 2021 start. And then all of a sudden, the vaccines, which had been procured so carefully by Minister Anand and her Department of Public Works, started coming online as planned. Variations week by week, here and there. But month after month, the numbers came in far greater quantities, in far larger amounts, because the contracts were well negotiated and because the portfolio was diversified. We didn't just pick one winner. We bet on all the horses. And now those horses are racing into the stables, and we're able to work with our provincial partners to accelerate the pace. And I think that what we're going to see in years to come is we're going to say, that was the moment. That's a moment that I remember being able to say, kids, you can go to a movie. You know, we're just looking forward to that moment. You know, we're going to be able to go have that backyard barbecue. We're going to go and enjoy a spaghetti dinner with our community. We're going to go visit the seniors' residence. These are all the things that are going to be made possible through the massive injection of so many doses of vaccines to Canadians. And all of it relates right back to that important and necessary decision to prorogue, to reconvene Parliament under the banner of a speech from the throne that could clearly indicate to Canadians, this is the path. Here's where we're going. And to bring forward a fall economic statement that put the fiscal meat on the bones of that plan. So I will, je vais conclure en remerciant.
So I will conclude by thanking my colleagues for agreeing to consider once again the relevance of a discussion on prorogation. We could even discuss the relevance of prorogation in a context in which we will all want to invest our efforts where they matter. And I do hope that the right decisions will be made to lead us to useful discussions on this committee. And I greatly appreciate, Madam Chair, the opportunity given to me to have this discussion with you today.
Greatly appreciate the time that I've been afforded by my esteemed colleagues.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Amos. Mr. Sarai. I think you need to bring your mic down.
Get a little lazy there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you, Chair. Appreciate the opportunity. This is my first time in PROC, and while we're discussing, I guess, a very important topic, this is new to me. So if I sound out of the ordinary on this, please let me know, Madam Chair. So I appreciate that.
Point of order, Madam Chair.
Yes, Ms. Vecchio?
I really, it's great to have Mr. Saray here for the first time. Perhaps we can let him know what the motion is so that we can actually stay of relevance on this next speaker.
Yeah, I think Mr. Saray
I
has
have the motion.
He has all
your
right.
motion,
No, I was
think
just.
It's the amendment to that by Mr. Turnbull. So
yes, so we're going on prorogation. I just want to ensure that we're actually on the right topic today. Thanks. I know I've heard a variety of things. I think even a HUMA motion that was presented to us and then presented to HUMA last week. Whatever we could do.
Thanks
no
for
problem.
Staying vigilant, Ms. Vecchio, staying vigilant, making sure. Thank you.
So the first thing that came to mind when I saw this was, what are my constituents thinking? I'm elected. I'm representing my constituents, and what are they talking about? And I have 120,000 constituents. I have a lot of young constituents. I have a diverse background of constituents. I have a riding that's been held by virtually all the parties. It was the legendary Chuck Cadman's riding originally. It was Penny Pretty, a legendary NDPer. Member of Parliament and MLA and Minister, and it's for the first time since 2015 been held by a Liberal myself. So it's had quite a bit of variety in its tenure. So I tried to see how many have actually asked about the prorogement, and to be honest with you, and I have one of the busiest constituency offices. I know all of you have a lot of activity, but really, other than when it happened, a couple people, I've had zero since then. And I will tell you that's because most people are worried about the recovery. They want to get back to things.
If I could just, I'm so sorry to interrupt. I'm having some difficulty with your sound going in and out and kind of phasing out a bit. I'm just wondering if the interpreters are probably having difficulty as well. Maybe we could just pause for a second.
Is it the internet or is it?
Oh, it's much better now.
Okay.
It's much better now. Mr. Clerk, is that better? You haven't had any complaints from the interpreters, have you?
Madam Chair, we haven't had any indication yet that it is a problem. Although when Mr. Sarai just started speaking again, it did seem to kind of dramatically improve. So yeah. It may have just been the positioning of the mic. I'll check with the techs in the room to see if there are any connectivity issues that Mr. Sarai might be experiencing on his end.
Okay, thank you. But yeah, it did improve a lot when you moved your mic, so that's great. I just don't want to strain the interpreters, because I was straining myself just trying to hear, so I can't imagine what they're going through. But I'm so sorry to interrupt. Go ahead, Mr. Sry.
No worries. Thank you. I've closed some windows, so hopefully I wasn't consuming too much bandwidth from the internet that might have been making this a slower or choppier experience. I was getting to what my constituents ask, and that's what I'm elected to do is address their concerns. And like I was saying, since I've gotten re-elected in 2019, even after the proroguement of Parliament in 2020, I have really had maybe two people in the beginning that I wanted to know why. They actually want to know the semantics of it. Otherwise, I've had no concern on it. In fact, what my constituents have been asking about is how do we get vaccines? How do we get vaccines into our arms? How do we get businesses back together? How do we save their jobs? And I think that's been the focus of the government. Then I look back at the history of proroguement and when it's been used, and I hate to say this, but it's funny to see uh, the who's calling the kettle black, or how they say it, that proroguement was used before to save a government from falling apart when three parties actually opposed them. In this case, it's a very contrarian version. We have a pandemic that, as my colleague Will Amos has said, nobody has seen in there, and Mr. Turnbull has said as well, in the last 100 years, since 1918. I think was the last time, and to go back, I've had to jog people's grandparents' memories, and even they only have heard about it, or they're very young and had maybe very vague memories of it to actually relate that experience. And so to continue on in government as if nothing had happened, as if nothing is going wrong, to continue with commitments that were made in an election just months earlier in a direction would be very unfair. It would actually it would have been very inappropriate. It would not be what prudent Canadians would expect the government to do. Prudent Canadians would expect the government to quickly be nimble, to quickly change, to quickly figure out what needs to be done on the fly immediately, and they would want to reset. And if there was ever any time, I think proroguement was justified, proroguement was needed, proroguement was essential. That was the time. That was the time when Canadians wanted to forget about everything else. They wanted to know, how am I going to be safe? How are my children going to be safe? How are my kids going to be going to school? How am I able to continue paying for my mortgage and for my rent? How am I going to have food on my table? And the government had to reposition and rethink that. And that was front and center of mind. Then we look at the length of times and the actual amount of times, and I think it's probably been hashed in this committee over and over again about the length of times and the many times the Conservative government previous to this government had used proroguement as a tool just for their own personal benefit when it was convenient, and yet this was done in a pandemic. And just look at the days that were postponed. It was months before where Parliament didn't sit. In this case, it was, I think, maybe 10 days. It was about a month of proroguement, and actual sitting days wise, it was just 10 or 12 days. And I think what we came back with, and what was given back after that period, was a great reset. It was a fall economic statement that painted a blueprint, pointed a roadmap of how we were going to survive this tenure, how we were going to build sustain our businesses, sustain our jobs, sustain our economy, and then how are we going to do a roadmap into recovery afterwards. And if you talk to any Canadian, you talk to anybody on Main Street, you talk to anybody on Bay Street, and you talk to anybody in the airline industry, the thousands and thousands of workers that are unemployed, that's what they wanted to hear us doing. That's what they wanted to hear us debating. They did not want us to debate other motions that were there from the past at the time. Nobody cared about those at that time. They wanted us to debate, how are we going to help. The first calls I got were obviously, as most of you got, were what's happening in my job? Is the government going to be there for us? The second calls I got actually were from employers who said, I know I'm going to go through it pretty rough, but please don't let me lay off my employees. I barely got them. These are some of the best workers I've had. It takes a long time to nurture. Can you figure out a way where I can still pay them a little bit? I'm continuing. I'm wanting to pay them even if I don't have much work, and if the government can assist me in that way. And the government responded, Madam Chair. The government responded in that way. We're able to keep millions of employees working, even though revenue had dropped in those businesses. After that, we heard again when I brought up was to my constituents that would call or via Zoom because we couldn't meet in person. Are you having an issue with prorogement or do you have any concerns on this? They were like, no, I don't want to talk about that. I want to talk about what are you doing about my rents? My business has been closed down. In Surrey Centre, we have a lot of banquet facilities. We had a lot of other facilities that were shut down, gyms and whatnot. And they said, who's going to pay my rent? I have huge footprints. Who's going to support us in this? And that's what they wanted to hear the government discussing at that time. That's what they wanted to hear in the debates in the halls of Parliament or on the screens of Parliament as we have switched to. That's what they wanted to see. And we came through. We said we'll give 65% to those that are hurt financially, but we'll give 90% that those are shut down by public health notices. And right now the calls I get from them are thank you, and what's the optimism going forward? I look around. Prior to March, we were on track. Had made 1 million jobs, lowest unemployment rate in prior to the pandemic in 2020. If you walked around, and I'm not in an affluent neighborhood, I have probably one of the lowest income family mean incomes in the Lower Mainland. But if you turned right out of my office door or turned left out of my office door, you would see help wanted signs in the windows of the London Drugs, of the Starbucks, of the. In fact, I got an employment nonprofit employment center next door, and who help people get employment. And quite frankly, they had very few to actually send over there because everyone was getting jobs, everyone was doing better. So I think the tool of prorogement is a very important tool. It should be used very scarcely. This government's only used it once. Used it only for a few weeks, and it was a time to have cabinet, have government, have the prime minister rethink. And in this case, it's a minority government, so everything has to be done with all the other parties. So you have to have them on board. This is not a unilateral execution of power or abuse of power. This is something that you have to work with the cooperation of your parties, your House leaders, the opposition leaders, and because you could face an election at any time. And all the measures were done in that pattern prior to prorogement and after that, and every party virtually voted for almost all those measures. What were those measures for? They were measures for Canadians to get through this. They were measures that we needed at that time. They were not Mickey Mouse. As my colleague, Mr. Amos, just said earlier, we were able to hedge the most procurement of vaccinations in the world for every single one. My skeptics, I have family and friends, just like all of us have, interesting Zoom conversations or chat groups where people are saying, are you really going to get me vaccinated? I'm not going to get vaccinated till 2022. And I think my old colleague, Ms. Rempel, the health critic, has said a lot of things about children getting vaccinated, third world getting vaccinated before us. But quite
Of order,
frankly,
Madam Chair.
Yes, Ms. Vecchio.
If we could just let's get back to the relevance of this, please.
Yeah. Well, Ms. Vecchio would like you to refer back to how this links to prorogation.
It absolutely links back.
Mr.
The relevant,
amendment.
Madam Vecchio, is that what is front of mind of Parliament, and we're all here for for the citizens of Canada, for our stakeholders, for this country's betterment, and what was the focus? And the focus was vaccinations. The focus was job recovery. The focus was saving jobs, and that's why prorogement was done. I think prorogement is an essential tool when used right, and that's why, quite frankly, I think Canadians are not caring about this. I think we've had our parliamentary committees that look into everything prior to that. They're looking into some of the stuff again, which they have every right to. Our parliamentary committees are very powerful instruments. I think they've gone through every program, every controversy, every issue that has popped up since then. And so, and they continue to do that. So I think a proroguement of 4 weeks and several days for a government to come back to create an agenda, a set of legislations that are there for a global emergency, a global pandemic, a global epidemic, is what was needed at the time, what was essentials, what was expected by Canadians, and what was delivered for Canadians. And even after that, I think if you see what happened after proroguement, well, right away, the House started very quickly. A fall economic statement was given. Right away after that, debates for that fall economic statements were done. Tweaks were made. Amendments were suggested. Parliamentary debates resumed. Parliamentary committees resumed. Parliamentary committees challenged those. New committees were set up, including one which I'm on, the Canada-US, to deal with that issue that came out of protectionism of the U.S. And we are debating, and we're continuing to do those. A new budget was given now, which is being debated as we speak, to deal with exactly those issues that are relevant to this day. So, Madam Chair, I think this is why Canadians elected this government. This is what Canadians expect in times like this, and that's what I wanted to share with this committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sarai. Ms. Shanahan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I see that we have our colleague, Mr. Blakey, that has his hands up. So I would be happy to cede my place to Mr. Blakey.
Thank you, Ms. Shanahan. Go ahead, Mr. Blakey. Is Mr. Blakey there? You probably didn't think your turn would come so soon, did you?
I am indeed. No, pleasantly surprised to get a turn a little earlier than I thought. I, raised my hand when there was some talk of, how we might have a discussion to move past this. I would note, I think it's important to note that, obviously there's a lot to do in Ms. Vecchio's motion about the We Charity scandal, but I think what's important to note is that my Liberal colleagues on the committee have also made this about the We Charity scandal, because they refuse to have a vote because they're trying to protect presumably the Prime Minister for sure, and others who are mentioned in the original motion, from having to come and discuss the We Charity scandal. So it's
good.
Sorry,
yesterday I got tied up.
You're not on mute, Mr. Sarai. Thank you.
So all that to say, Madam Chair, that it's very much the Liberals on the committee who have made this as much about the We Charity scandal as anybody else. What I've tried to propose is a way forward that puts the focus back on prorogation. We've heard many times, and I don't think it's in dispute, that the Prime Minister effectively, while it's a prerogative of the Crown to prorogue Parliament, she does that on the advice of the Prime Minister. So it's effectively the Prime Minister's prerogative to decide when Parliament is prorogued. There's obviously differences of opinion about the reasons for the Prime Minister's prorogation. And we've heard also some disagreement and I think some real questions. Even we've heard from some Liberals at committee that, well, the length of the prorogation might have been different and maybe we didn't quite get that right. And so and the timing of when it began, for instance. So there are some questions about the nature of the prorogation. We know that the Prime Minister is the decision maker. I've offered many times on the record and off the record to various folks on the Liberal side that we could bring this back to the topic of prorogation by having the Prime Minister at committee for an hour and as far as I'm concerned anyway, dispense with the rest, because I know that there are other committees that are pursuing the We Charity question, and rightly so. But for as long as my Liberal colleagues are going to continue to filibuster in order to defend other Liberals from having to talk about the We Charity scandal, this is what it's about. And so if we're going to end up voting on this motion, then I'm going to support the Conservatives' motion. There's no doubt in my mind about that. So the question then becomes, can we get back to making this about prorogation? And that means having the sole decision maker on prorogation come before the committee. And I would add, and I know I'm not saying anything exactly new here, but I think it's important because we've heard so much. We've heard so much, so many words from other colleagues that I think it's easy to lose the thread here. The reason we're having this study is because the Prime Minister himself proposed this as a mechanism to prevent political abuses of prorogation. There can be legitimate reasons for prorogation. I think I've said here before, maybe I haven't. I mean, the Manitoba legislature routinely prorogues every year. They come back with a speech from the throne. There have been uncontroversial prorogations in Canada's history. There were several, I think, in the Chrétien era. Nobody's talked about them because they weren't interesting. There are a lot of ways to prorogue Parliament. It's certainly I'm not disputing that is a tool that can be used. The pandemic clearly it's all consuming, and so the idea that there might be a prorogation having to do with that is not outlandish. It's just that it happened to be announced the day after the Minister of Finance resigned, right in the middle of a scandal, and the day before a whole bunch of documents were due that might have shed some light on that scandal. So I mean, I think any right-thinking person might think that there really is a connection there. So yes, there may be questions for the Prime Minister about the We Charity scandal, but also the timing of the beginning of that prorogation. And there's also questions about, why the Prime Minister saw fit not to end it earlier, for instance, and to have us come back in order to have a far more fulsome discussion than took place in Parliament about the expiration of the CERB program and what would replace it. And of course, we know that legislation ended up being rushed through, and that there were some problems with that legislation. Again, when we talk about the sickness benefit, and then people later using that in order to quarantine from international travel that they had taken against the advice of the government, that was something that all parties agreed to that legislation, didn't identify that as a problem. But in fairness to opposition parties, I'll say, we didn't have a lot of time with that legislation. It was tabled and it had to be passed in a matter of days because the CERB deadline was there, despite the fact that I know I can say with certainty, New Democrats were calling for the House to sit in the month of September so that we could have that longer discussion. So there are a lot of legitimate questions about the timing and the nature of the prorogation that belong rightly with the sole decision maker in respect of prorogation in the context of a study that has come about as a result of his own proposal for how best to prevent abuses of prorogation. And it makes perfect sense to have the Prime Minister here for 1 hour and we could move on. So I'm putting that back on the table. I welcome a discussion about why it is that people don't think 1 hour of the Prime Minister's time in order to make good on his own proposal for how to prevent abuses of prorogation, the kinds that we saw in the Harper years. And I would like for some of my Liberal colleagues to say, if they think it's true, that had this mechanism existed in the Harper parliaments, that they would not have thought that it was appropriate for Stephen Harper to come before PROC and defend his government's position. And then maybe explain how this mechanism is actually supposed to prevent political abuse of prorogation if the only decision maker doesn't actually have to defend the decision in questioning to committee, because then I don't think it's a very good mechanism. Of course, people at this committee will know, I think the best mechanism would actually be to have Parliament vote on prorogation, because in instances of non-controversial prorogations, and as I say, there's been more of those than not in Canada's history, it would not be difficult, I don't think, in order to get Parliament's assent to a prorogation. But in cases where it is controversial, then I actually think it's Parliament that should decide whether Parliament rises. And it's Parliament that should decide whether all the work of committees is suspended or not. It's Parliament that ought to decide whether the legislative agenda gets cleared or not. If a government doesn't want to move forward with certain legislation, it's always their prerogative not to put it up for debate on any given day. We saw that. Bill C-27 was a bill that was a bad bill, I might add. It was presented by the Liberal majority government in the last Parliament. And hardly, I don't know that it got debated at all, in fact. And I was relieved. I would have preferred that that the government just withdrew it to give people peace of mind about their pension. And that kind of always hung over people's head in the last Parliament. So withdrawing it would have been a better way forward, or dare I say, even a prorogation mid-Parliament. I mean, there were times in the last Parliament that I did say, I think we're about due for a prorogation. There's a lot of stuff on the order paper that the government clearly isn't interested in moving forward with. And I think it would be good to just kind of have the government reset its direction. Then the government picked the most controversial moment that it possibly could have, raising the specter of political abuse for prorogation after over 5 years in government. So yeah, we've got questions. That's fair. That's what Parliament's for. That's what the accountability of function of Parliament is all about. And that's a principle of responsible government, is that elected parliamentarians be able to pose questions directly to decision makers within government. So let's get the Prime Minister here, let's get the study over with, and let's move on to something else. Anyway, thank you thank you to Ms. Shanahan for allowing me to make that intervention sooner rather than later. And thanks to the committee for listening to that again.
Thank you, Mr. Blakey, and it was nice to see your little one there join us for a little bit, make a special guest appearance. It always lightens everyone's, I think, day and mood to see the little ones. But next we've got Mr. Long. Mr. Long, oh, Mr. Long? Mr. Long, are you there? Maybe we can come back to Mr. Long afterwards if he's not there. Is there a technical issue, or is there?
How about now?
Oh, okay, there's more of a technical issue. Yes, we can hear you, Mr. Long, but we can't see you.
Oh.
Mm-hmm. There we go.
Okay.
All good.
Are we back?
Yes, yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and it's great to be back. Apologize for the technical glitch. I'm not quite sure what happened there. Maybe somebody was telling me that they didn't really want to hear what I was going to say, but
sabotage, maybe sabotage.
But anyway, look, it's great to be back to talk to all of you, my colleagues, my friends. Great to see Randeep here. Great speech, MP Sarai. Will, another great speech, and obviously Mr. Blakey. I had hoped when you come on, I had my fingers crossed that you were going to give us something that was new and something that we could actually ponder, but it wasn't to be. I guess, look, I've got lots to say again, but I just want to just ask MP Vecchio, just not to put her on the spot at all, but I just want to ask her straight up, are you moving off of calling the Prime Minister to this committee at all?
Thank you very much, Mr. Long. I think as we have heard from all of the opposition parties, including Mr. Blakey just moments ago, the one thing that we are looking for is the Prime Minister. To me, the biggest sticking point that I'm seeing, and thanks very much for asking that, Mr. Long.
No problem.
The biggest sticking point that we have here is we're hearing from the Liberal Party, or I'm sorry, the government, that the Prime Minister will not come because he's already testified at committee last summer. Well, that was pre-prorogation. We're asking why he prorogued on August the 18th. So he never answered any questions about prorogation because he went to committee prior to prorogation. So I think that's one of the things. I've heard Mr. Blakey speak about this many times. The Prime Minister is what everybody is looking for on the opposition side. And once again, I'm sorry, I don't mean to speak for the Bloc or anyone else.
No.
But I think that is the holding point. And until there can come to something, you're saying everybody on the government saying no, the Prime Minister will not come. He's done this before, which that is incorrect, or we're just going to continue to filibuster. So I mean, obviously, I don't know what the final solution is. I just know the majority of the committee would like to hear from the Prime Minister. And the reason that this continues is if we go to a vote, the majority of this committee would vote to have the Prime Minister here. So I know that is the bottom line. So
I just want it to be crystal clear because, I mean, again, we're all here, we're all friends and we're all trying to find a way forward. And I just thought, oh, well, maybe they'll move off or maybe, and I just wanted to see, just where you were and where everybody
and
was.
perhaps the SIMS protocol, maybe Mr. Long, you can explain to me why the Prime Minister, everybody's talking about this, but if we're saying no to the Prime Minister, why are you guys fighting so hard and saying, hey, he's been here before? He hasn't been here before. So I'm just asking. He hasn't talked about prorogation to any committees, and that is what we're fighting for.
And look, I respect that. I obviously don't agree with it, but I think the issue for me on this MP Vecchio, or Karen, is that I think that, again, and we've all talked about this and, compared, then Prime Minister Harper to this prorogation. And I know MP Sims certainly talked about prorogation in different parliaments across the, around the world, if you will. And, we can certainly for Prime Minister Harper proroguing were to avoid an election and the defeat of his government and so on and so forth. And, we can cite all those examples. And, we would say, well, the Prime Minister, and I'm certainly going to get into that when I start my actual speech, but, he prorogued for a completely different set of circumstances and reasons than previous. And I mean, I know you would say, well, that doesn't really matter. We are here and now. But, again, I would say, again, just trying to keep it real here before I start my speech, is that, and is MP Blakey on? I'm not sure he is. Well, he's there. But I guess, do you really feel you're going to hear something different? And I'm going to get into, what he said here in a second in my speech. But I guess, again, we're all kind of in that Ottawa bubble and we all, think we're going to get a different outcome. But I guess I'm just trying to find a way forward. I mean, obviously, Minister Freeland was, I believe, chair of the COVID committee and so on and so forth. And I just wondered, and maybe this is the appropriate time to actually start my speech. And I just, that's what I wonder. I just wonder if, you honestly, or my conservative colleagues would really
all colleagues, all opposition colleagues,
but would think that they're going to get a different outcome. And I'll start by reading what the Prime Minister said. I mean, I'll start my speech if that's okay, Madam Chair. Here's what the Prime Minister said. We are proroguing Parliament to bring it back on exactly the same week it was proposed to come back anyway, to force a confidence vote. We are taking a moment to recognize that the throne speech we delivered 8 months ago had no mention of COVID-19 and no conception of the reality we find ourselves in right now. We need to reset the approach of this government for recovery to build back better. And those are big, important decisions, and we need to present that to Parliament and gain the confidence of Parliament to move forward on this ambitious plan. Prorogation we are doing right now is about gaining or testing the confidence of the House. And I think all of us didn't expect, I mean, how could any of us expect what we have faced since, March of 2020? And I think the curveball that we were given as parliamentarians, MPs, as government, as opposition, was unprecedented. Obviously, we talk about, a generational, once in 100 years event that hit all of us. So, the fact that we felt, the Prime Minister felt that, we needed to step back, regroup, strategize, come up with new plans and priorities. I don't, and I mean, I know that we say we needed to do that, and obviously we did need to do that. I think Canadians agree that that's what was needed to be done, and I respect very much the other parties don't agree with that. They don't think that was needed to be done, and then I will come to your motion, and I won't read it, but your motion, we want to study the government's reasons for prorogation. And I did spend some time last night actually pulling that back out again. And, it's actually getting a little wrinkly. I should probably make a new copy. But again, a once in a generation pandemic, hopefully. All of us as Canadians, parliamentarians, government officials, departments, were kicked in the gut, had our feet taken out from underneath us on this. No one knew what they were dealing with. So the fact that we had to do what we did, and the fact that the motion was put forward, study the government's reasons for prorogation. Okay. So the Prime Minister clearly gave his reasons. You may not agree with the reasons. That's fair. Opposition has a role to play in our government. Government doesn't work without a great opposition. But to me, the motion to, again, study the government's reasons, and then we went through, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and H. And, and apologize, for saying this again, but it wasn't just the Prime Minister, the Deputy Prime Minister, and Diversity and Youth, and then Bill Morneau and Katie Telford and Craig Kilberg and Mark Kilberger, and then the Pearl Muters, and then like memoranda, emails, text messages, documents. It was like, I think, especially if you took a few steps back and asked Canadians in particular why we prorogued. And as I said before, I'll pull this up. I always talk about, I do a little survey before just to gauge if I'm way off, or my line of thinking is right, because sometimes you get so close, the old saying, you get so close to the forest you can't see the trees. And so, again, prorogation, and I pulled it up, just in politics is the action of proroguing or ending an assembly, especially in Parliament, or the discontinuance of meetings for a given period of time without a dissolution of Parliament. So I asked people, well, first off, if they knew what prorogation was. And it's taken me about a month and a half now to actually say it correctly, prorogation. Still kind of stumble there a little bit. So I asked people today and a little last night if they knew what prorogation was. I had 2 out of maybe 20 that even knew what it was. But then I explained to the other 18 what it was for. And, to be fair, this wasn't to avoid our government falling or anything like that. I just said, do you feel it was necessary for us to reset, given the curveball that we were given with respect to COVID-19? I mean, certainly not an accurate poll, but basically 100% of them agreed. Yes, we did need to reset. So, what troubles me with respect to the motion, and then, MP Turnbull's amendment, because I want to make sure I stay on topic here with respect to the amendment, was I felt that, again, from your party that proposed the motion, and I know that when you make motions, you will make sure you cast as wide a net as possible. Look, we would have done it too. I wasn't there, but we would have done it too, and we were in opposition. I get that. But there was a lot in there, and I think that maybe at some point there may be we did throw everything but the kitchen sink in there. We wanted to make sure we had all that covered. Everything. As I read from A to H. But then MP Turnbull's amendment to the motion was what I deem a compromise. And yep, straight up, Prime Minister's not on it. I mean, we all know. But I'm still having a hard time. I'm having a real hard time understanding what anybody on this committee won't get from Minister Freeland, who chaired the committee, and I fail to understand what you're not going to get from Minister Freeland that you would get from the Prime Minister. I don't understand it. Now, I mean, you may say, well, we will probably get the same thing, but it's not the Prime Minister, it's Minister Freeland. And we want that, that time with the Prime Minister sitting before this committee instead of Minister Freeland. When I believe, and, I have been accused of sometimes, not being, as buttoned down with respect to, procedures and policies and motions and things like that as a lot of other MPs. That's not my strength. My strength is just a passion for representing my riding and for connecting with people here. But I always use those words. I want to keep it real. I want all of us on this committee to, as I said before, prorogue themselves for a little bit and step back and say, look, okay, we want the clip or the, photo of the Prime Minister testifying before this committee, knowing, and I of course respect everybody very much on the committee, but we all know, all of us, that we won't get anything different from the Prime Minister than what he's already said. We all know that. Every one of us, as I look around some of these boxes, every one of us knows that. Now, we may get the ability to say after it happens, oh, look, he didn't give us what we wanted. The Prime Minister said exactly what he said prior. Well, yeah, fair. Because he's already said it. He is not going to say, and I'm probably stepping over my skis here a bit, but I'm not speaking obviously for the Prime Minister. But come on, he's not going to say anything different than he's already said, because that's the reasons why he prorogued. So, to me, I feel it's important for the committee to really reevaluate what's important here. And I know MP Blakey has, said, look, he has every right, of course, to call the Prime Minister. I know MP Blakey is an honorable man and extremely, extremely intelligent, and knows the ways of these committees. And a lot of respect for MP Blakey. And I sat on a committee with him, and I was wowed by his knowledge and insight and thoughtful comments and questions. But I know MP Blakey also knows, I know he knows, that there's not going to be anything different from the Prime Minister being called before this committee. No way. Come on. He knows that. I know he does. So, we're trying to find a way forward. And, I've got all kinds. In fact, I really, to be perfectly frank, haven't really started my speech. This is just a kind of a preamble, if you will. If you want to have a book, it's, what do they call it? Prelogue or I don't really read books. I have trouble reading books, to be honest, unless there's pictures in there. It's my ADHD. I can actually read a chapter of a book and be done the chapter of the book and say, what did I just read? I learned through visual and talking things out and watching things. I have a lot of trouble reading. But look, I believe this. I believe there is a way forward here. I believe that NP Turnbull's amendment, it's hard, I'll be honest with you, as a lot of you know me, I love to talk, but it's hard to, talk about the same things. And, I certainly don't want to tell MP Turnbull what a great MP is, because I've already told him that, I think, last meeting or the meeting prior. But he is a great MP, and I know he's extremely passionate about what he does and what he brings. And I know that this amendment, I apologize for the scribbles. You can see every meeting I do a little few extra doodles, except for when MP Turnbull speaks, because I listen to every word he does say. It's so thought provoking. But I do believe his amendment is something that the Conservative Party, the NDP, the Bloc, MP Normandin, that the amendment is a fair compromise. NP Turnbull's amendment moves us forward. I think that, I want to And maybe when we move on to the next study or what have you, my days at PROC will quickly come to an end. But I want to see PROC be what PROC should be, and doing great work. And like I said to you before, I've subbed in many committees, and obviously I've spent a ton of time on HUMA, because HUMA is when we're first elected, we get our little checklist there, what committees we'd like to be on. And I remember looking at the list and it's like, oh, what do all these things stand for? What does HUMA stand for and what does PROC stand for? Of course, everything's got a shortened name. So, I checked off HUMA and I was on ethics. And actually, MP Calkins, he's there somewhere. I don't know what you're holding there. Is that an Arctic char? Blaine? What's in that picture? Well, maybe he's not there. His picture's there anyway. But, MP Calkins chaired ethics. I was on ethics. I think back, there was me and Nate Erskine-Smith, and Joel Lightbound, and maybe sitting beside Nate, rubbed off of me a bit. But, I guess what I'm getting to with respect to ethics is that we got a lot of great work done. We did a lot of great work. Our chair, MP Calkins, he did a great job as chair, and we collaborated, we compromised, and we got some good stuff done. And certainly, my committee on HUMA, chaired by Brian May, who I got to know very, very well, great chair. And now HUMA by Sean Casey. Again, lots of collaboration, lots of working together. We got some good stuff done. And I know PROC, if you want to put the pecking order of kind of senior committees and committees that people are on, PROC's right up at the top. The work that PROC does is fundamental to the workings of Parliament. But not now. Not right now. No, not right now. We're stuck. We're at a stalemate. We're not moving. We're not moving forward. Canadians aren't engaged with this. They're not concerned about this. And it's not that they don't care. Look, it's not that they don't care about the workings of Parliament and committees and all that stuff, but they're not seized with this at all. At all. And we all reference at times about, for those Canadians who are watching and those Canadians who are tuned in to this right now. Well, I always wonder how many people are actually tuned into this, and this is a big part of their daily lives. And, it harkens me back to a previous life. It was always that, what would you call it, enigma to me. It's like, I was involved with the major junior hockey team. I think you all know that. And we had radio broadcasts. And, it was a negotiation, and the broadcaster was putting our price up to carry the games. So we dug in, and we really dug into how many people were listening to our games on the road and at home, and how much would it be, how much would it cost for an ad, and all those things. And we dug in, and we were actually shocked as to how few people listen to us on the radio. I won't give you the number. We're like, oh, that's it. So I guess where I'm going with that, Madam Chair, thanks for giving me a little latitude on that, is so here we are in PROC, and I know we're addressing Canadians and we're talking to Canadians, but how many people do we really think are tuned into this and listening with bated breath every word that Wayne Long's going to say, or MP Duncan, or MP Turnbull, or MP Normandin, or MP Cantor, Calkins, or Amos, or what have you? You think they're all tuned in there with their little notepads and they're taking notes and they're, look at these guys go. Look at them go on this. Oh, look at them going back and forth and they're filibustering and they're doing this and they're doing that. No, they're not. No, they're not. No, I can tell you straight up, they're not. That's a cold reality for everybody. They're not. They're not seized with this. Let me say it again. Canadians aren't seized with this. Sure, as MP Blakey has said, we have a right to study. In MP Vecchio's motion, of course, we have a right to study why. How is that actually worded again? Sorry. The government's reasons for the prorogation of Parliament in August 2020. Okay, fair. We have a right to study it. So let's dig in and study why they prorogue. When the Prime Minister's already said why he's prorogued. Minister Rodriguez, I believe, not even looking at my notes, but has testified and given reasons why there was prorogation. Officials have said why. What Canadians are seized with is the uncertainty that this pandemic has brought, that this pandemic has brought into their lives, their daily lives. And I had no idea when I signed up to be a member of Parliament in 2015. And then obviously was lucky enough and fortunate enough to serve 4 great years where we did wonderful, wonderful things as a government and as a parliament. And then fortunate enough to run again in 2019. Win my seat. I'm the only red dot in the southern part of New Brunswick. I wear that as a sense of pride. I mean, we've got some work to do, obviously. But if you draw that line across the province, it's all blue, except for me, little old me down here in this little red dot. And again, I wear that with a sense of pride. But what I'm getting at, Madam Chair, is that none of us knew that we all would be faced with something that has changed our lives forever. And it's not to say that, we're all never going to be good again, or we're not going to heal, and we're not going to move forward and recover, but we will never be the same. And I don't say that. I don't say that like it's devastatingly bad. I don't mean it like that. But we have all changed in a certain way. Our thoughts, our outlook on things, our outlook on the future. I mean, look, I love going to school classes to talk to students. Love it. Can't get enough of it. from honestly kindergarten right up to grade 12. Love it. And I used to go in before this pandemic and we would talk about parliament and governments and world order and so on and so forth. And I always used to say to the students, I still say to the students, look, one bit of advice, don't ever think that history is done changing. And yes, from the Second World War till now, we've had, obviously flare-ups, but relative stable world order. Don't think that just because from 1940, late 40s till now, that it was always going to be the same and things will never change. Change will happen. Change will come when we least expect it. And boy, oh boy, when we ran in 19, all of us, with our beliefs and our passions and our ideologies, what have you, none of us were prepared for what came at us in 2020. None of us. And, give or take, when we saw cases of COVID-19, the coronavirus start in, and I apologize, I'm going to be off here, but, it was probably November, December. And then, we came back and we were back up in Ottawa. Sorry about that, interpreters. We were back up at Ottawa. The end of January, just fresh off our elections. And, we didn't know what was hitting us. We didn't know what was coming. And then some cases came to North America and Canada, and then it got home and closer to home. And then we got more and more concerned. And I remember talking to my wife, Denise. And, obviously Denise is here in St. John and I was in Ottawa, and talked, and she was like, what's happening? And more importantly, what's going to happen? And
Madame la Présidente.
Madam Chair, if you allow me, I love hearing my colleague, and I think it's interesting once in a while to remember when the crisis started. But we talked about it today, and beyond the history of the crisis and the fact that the history is being written right now, where the problem is here, the presence of the Prime Minister and the committee to talk about the reasons for the prorogation and also the amendment of Mr. Turnbull that we're talking about. Maybe Mr. Long could talk about one or the other, but ideally about the presence of the Prime Minister. It seems we're really at the heart of the issue.
Madame Normandy is raising a point of relevance, and so just a reminder to the speaker.
For sure. I mean, if I do say this is really good, because, and yes, Madam Chair, I'll get back to MP Turnbull's amendment. But the point I'm making, and I'll just close this up on this point. The point I'm making is what was said to me moved me. What's happening? What's going to happen? And then, when are you coming home? When are you coming home? And the fact, and why, the reason I'm saying that, and obviously that Friday night I came home, and the rest is history with respect to what happened after we got home and the numbers and so on and so forth. But my point is that MP Vecchio's motion as to, studying the reasons for prorogation. How can you reasonably wonder why we prorogue when we literally had to use an old football analogy with the Buffalo Bills, circle the wagons, they used to say, and regroup and make sure that we came out with a new throne speech with the proper policies and plans to support Canadians. So, again, I go back to MP Turnbull's amendment to MP Vecchio's motion. And I would read it, and I had, a few other people obviously read this too. I mean, look, if you're really not vested, as a Liberal or Conservative or Bloc or NDP or Green or Independent, and you read the motion, anybody objectively reading this motion would say, oh boy, there's something going on here. Something's smoke here. We got, where there's smoke, there's fire. Like we got something here. And we're going to get to the bottom of why they prorogued, and we're going to, production of records of communications with the we and memoranda and emails. And I believe that people who are objective in not doing it for, partisan political reasons. And again, let me jump in quickly here. I know this happens on both sides of that fence. I don't know, I should take that back. But, when we were in opposition, Her Majesty's loyal opposition is there to keep the government's feet to the fire, to challenge, to, make sure. But we all know why we prorogued. Canadians, put it bluntly, don't really, I don't want to say they don't care, but they're not concerned about prorogation. They're not. We prorogued because we needed to reset. So, it's not like we're trying to run away from it and sweep it under the rug per se. No. MP Turnbull has come back with an amendment saying, okay, fair points. You want this, and this, and this. Okay. So we're going to propose this. And, I respect very much that we obviously have taken out the Prime Minister, but we still have in that amendment the Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Diversity, Inclusion, and Youth. We're still saying, look, these are senior people. These are senior people in our government who chaired the COVID committee, I don't think anybody here, or really anybody in Canada, wouldn't argue that Minister Freeland is as prominent and involved minister in our government. I mean, I would, again, I don't want to be too far over my skis here, but I would have a hard time thinking that she wouldn't have the answers to the questions that the opposition parties want to ask. But then I'll go back to this, and I believe this. It really, I shouldn't say it at times feels like it's not just about getting answers, it's getting answers from the Prime Minister when he's already answered the reasons why we, government, what have you, PROC. I mean, I think that NP Turnbull's amendment to the motion is well thought out. I'll be honest with you. When I first read it, I'll be honest. I was like, "What? Whoa!" Whoa! I didn't actually call or message MP Turnbull. I was like, "Oh, like, are you sure that you meant to keep the deputy prime minister in there? Like, you sure?" But yes, he did. Jeez, I mean, look, I thought it was a mistake when I first seen it, to be perfectly honest. I thought it was a mistake. I was like, "Oh, no, they can't. They don't mean that to have Christy Freeland in there." Oh, yeah. Yep, there she is. Right there. So I know all of us know that there won't be a different answer. There won't be a different sentence than has already been said. So then you go back to, okay, why is the prime minister, why is inviting the prime minister such a stumbling block? And then I go back to, it's because of the optics and the perception of calling the prime minister when he's already said it, the reasons why. I mean, I take that back. I know that Canadians are seized with getting through this pandemic. I mean, we have such great news with respect to vaccines and the amount of vaccines that are coming into this country. I very, very happily got my AstraZeneca vaccine 3 weeks back. My wife Denise did too. Obviously, I suffer from some very mild asthma and things like that. But you know, I get my flu shot every year faithfully. But the euphoria, the excitement, the gratitude, the thankfulness I had by getting my AstraZeneca vaccine, I can't describe it. Now, I'm not going to say I was emotional to the point where I went outside and cried, but I will say I was like, you know, thank God that the vaccine was available. Thank God that science is winning over, and that we have the capability to produce something that can literally save millions of lives. And also, thank God that we have a government. And, you know, look, of course, you know, I'm a Liberal member of Parliament, and I'm proud of my party and our policies and our leader and so on and so on and so on. But it made me thankful of just Canada and the fact that we have those systems in place, and we have a government, and that we have strong government that can look after us in times of crisis and need. And we hadn't been through this. Very, very thankful. And, you know, obviously all of us are politicians and in the political world, but, you know, my view of government and political people and politicians has changed. I have a newfound, and this may sound crazy, we got MP Kent there going with his binoculars. I don't know if it's a good view out there. What's going on?
Looking for the end of the filibuster.
Well, hopefully those binoculars are strong and you can see for a long time, because but no, look, all joking aside, this has given me a profound respect and thankfulness for our systems, our politicians. Yes, there's been mistakes made. Yes, I know if different politicians could do different things, they would, whether it's provincial or federal. And yes, there's been some partisanship and there's been this and that. I get it all. But you know what? Everybody is trying the very best they can to deal with an unprecedented, once in a generation pandemic. So, you know, when there's a study proposed to study the reasons for prorogation, and the study is very detailed. My, oh my. The only thing missing there is a couple backbenchers like me testifying on this thing too. I mean, everybody was included in this thing. I think MP Turnbull's amendment to the motion is a way out. I believe it. I believe it's a way out. So, you know, I asked again, and people can jump in, but is there anybody on that screen? And like I say, sometimes it's like it likens me back. I show my age on this, but think about the Brady Bunch, and you know, the only thing missing is I need Brenda to turn that way and Karen to turn that way, and then you're looking at each other, and we need the music going, and I need what was the maid's name again? Can anyone help me with that?
Alice.
Alice.
Life and Sam.
Right. My, oh my, I never missed an episode of the Brady Bunch. MP Blakey probably doesn't even know what the Brady Bunch is. There's the discrepancy in age right there between me and MP Blake. He probably doesn't even know what it is. He may get it on the old, what's the channel, the flashback channel, whatever it is. And I think it actually was in color, not black and white. But what I'm getting at is this. I believe that it's incumbent on every member of parliament that's on this committee to step back, do your own proroguing for a couple minutes, and say, NP Turnbull's motion is good enough to move us forward. Maybe MP Normandin may think that. Look, she's kind of pondering. She's like, she's not saying no. Oh, well, maybe she is saying no. Darn.
A point of order, Madam Chair.
Oh.
Yes, Mr. Nader.
Perhaps this would be a good chance to see where everyone is on this, and yes or no. I know Mr. Long is kind of wondering where everyone stands, so perhaps we could do a roll call vote and see for sure where everyone stands on it and solve this once and for all.
No,
Yeah.
I'm actually
Long?
no,
Up to you.
No. I appreciate very much MP Nader's intervention, and I apologize if you've been on the screen, MP Nader, the whole time. I don't know if you were there. It was a black screen. I know some of your colleagues. MP Calkins, I was trying to talk to him about what kind of fish he had in that picture, but still not getting an answer. Might it be I think it's a char, to be honest, an Arctic char.
Relevance.
Yeah, I think you're right on that one, Mr. Nader. Mr.
But
Long?
I do, but
Yeah.
look, with respect to MP Turnbull's amendment to the motion, you know, MP Normandin or MP Blakey, I would say you should really consider that this is a good way forward, that we can move forward. We can do good things on PROC again. We can, well, I shouldn't say we, I'm just a guest appearance here, but you can get back to doing things that Canadians care about. And I know each and every one of us wants to leave work at the end of the day. And I mean, I know we can't leave our work. I know that that's not what we signed up for, of course. But I know I want to leave and say, look at the work we did and look at the impact we had and look at what we delivered for Canadians. And I can't be more proud to talk about things that we as government or MPs or our party has done for Canadians. I mean, case in point. I mean, with respect to MP Turnbull's amendment to the motion, look at what was delivered in budget 2021. Look at the transformational, look at that little guy there, MP Nader, that's awesome. Congratulations, that's awesome. Yeah, love it. Look at the stuff we delivered in budget 2021. Look at like, who would think? I'm so privileged and honored to be a member of parliament, to be part of a government that is moving forward toward $10 daycare. That is investing in, green infrastructure. That's replenishing trade corridor funding and funding for housing. There's not an MP on this screen that doesn't need affordable housing in their riding. And the fact that we came forth with Rapid Housing Initiative, direct federal funding, and all of us are always asked those questions. Can you do this funding project, or can you do this housing project? And sometimes we have to go back and say, well, we really would like to, but the provinces control housing. And with respect to MP Turnbull's amendment, what I'm getting at is obviously the reason the amendment was proposed, obviously, was to find a way forward. Now, this is where I'm going to get myself in trouble with, don't worry, everybody, but this is where I can get myself into trouble with respect to procedures and so on. So I'll apologize in advance if I totally muff this and get this wrong. But like, he didn't have to propose the amendment. Okay? Didn't have to propose it. Could have just been talking about MP Vecchio's motion forever and ever, and debating that, going back and forth. But no, didn't happen. The Liberal MPs on PROC got together. I wasn't there because I'm not a permanent member, although I hopefully will be invited to the next, like I said before, barbecue or Christmas party in the future. But no, the Liberal MPs got together and said, let's go back with something palatable, something reasonable. Didn't have to. To be perfectly honest, and I know I talked about it before, when I first read it, I was like, oh, he must have made a mistake. He's got the Deputy Prime Minister in here, and Minister of Finance, and Minister of Diversity and Inclusion. You think about this just for a second. Ponder this. That amendment could have come back and proposed. MP Turnbull could have proposed this without them in there, keeping on topic, talking about the amendment. This could have came back and been proposed or tabled or however it is. Sorry, by MP Turnbull. He could have came back to PROC and said, Madam Chair, I would like to propose an amendment to MP Vecchio's motion. Right? And he could have taken out the Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Finance, Minister of Diversity, could have taken them right out and just proposed everything else. And the opposition then, I'll be honest, would have had really, might have had the right to say, well, hold on, whoa. You took everything out. You whitewashed this. This is not fair. No, not at all. Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Diversity and Inclusion were included still in it. And that's where I took this as a, not third-party observer, obviously, but, as a, not totally on the front line of the PROC committee, looked at it and said, that's a very, very fair amendment to the motion. And I would have called and talked to MP Turnbull, who proposed this amendment, and I would have said, Ryan, come on. You're giving an amendment to the motion. Come on. There's no meat in this. There's no meat in the bone. There's no teeth to this. But there is teeth to this. There very much is teeth to this. Madam Chair,
yes?
Would I be allowed to propose a 5 or 10 minute break?
Yeah, of course. You Does everyone need a bio break
A
for
bio
10 minutes?
if I could, I would very much appreciate that.
Okay, I see some nodding. So just
Okay.
10 minutes then?
Sure.
Suspended.
Thank you.
meeting back to order. So there's a couple of things I just wanted to inform the committee about. I did not know this before we suspended for the 10-minute bio break, but learned of this near the end of it, that our interpreters have to switch over. And generally, we've been doing a rolling switchover, but whatever the reason is they're not able to do it in that fashion right now, and they have to do a complete switchover, and that takes about half an hour. So we would have to, at the very least, suspend for that half hour until 3 o'clock. They would be starting now at 2:30 to 3. I also wanted to let you guys know that we have the same issue of the Agriculture Committee being here after that. They would need to take over the room at 3:30 in order to prepare if they're going to have that committee today. So those are the two pieces of information I wanted to let you know. If we were to suspend for translation, that takes us to 3. That gives us from 3 to 3:30 until we have to make a decision about whether agriculture or whatever other committee goes on or not. So I want to just put that out there for you guys to be able to let me know what you'd like to do, whether you'd like to suspend for translation. I mean, we have to do that. There's no choice on that. But if you want to return at 3, I guess that's the choice, and make the next decision after that, or if you just like to suspend until the next sitting day, or the next scheduled meeting.
Madam Chair, I know that many of us understand that ending at 2:30 is something that will need to be done in order to allow.
Is it just me? No, it's her. Okay. You've cut out. We have to hear what you've said all over again. Ms. Vecchio, we didn't hear any of it. Ms. Vecchio,
no?
we still can't hear you.
She's frozen on my
Can you
screen.
hear me?
Yeah,
We're
no.
muted.
No, you're going in and out, but we can't really make out anything
you know something?
said.
Okay. I know what. Can you hear me now? It's probably because I put my iPad on, and so that I could watch QP. That is why. So I apologize if I turned that off. I had too much Wi-Fi going.
Okay.
So I do. We all recognize that there is great work being done in other committees, and the Agricultural Committee. We don't want to see anything being delayed. That being said, I believe that we'd all agree to suspend. But before we do, I think there is a huge concern that we'll be coming back to just more of this. And so I would ask that there is true negotiations taking place where we can actually come to resolution. I think that all parties have played on what we don't want or what we do want. And right now, until anything can go to a vote, we are stuck here with Ryan. So if we really want to get forward with real negotiations, we should be doing that. And not just being stuck on Ryan's, because we all recognize that no one on the opposition side is voting for this. Even with Ryan speaking for hours and hours, I do not believe that he's going to get his wish of changing anybody's mind. So we know we're there. So let's face the facts and come up with a resolution.
Okay, I think everyone respects you, Ms. Vecchio, and your position on that, and definitely some takeaway, and I encourage all of you to be able to come to some agreement. Of course, this has been difficult, I think, on all the members, not being able to do the good work, and as Mr. Long has put it, that PROC is supposed to be doing. So we will suspend until the next meeting, and hopefully that takes place. Suspended. Okay.